What happened to the female pirates when they were captured? What chance did a woman have in a naval courtroom where even the law was written by men who considered piracy unnatural for a woman? The answer, as history coldly reveals, is almost none. Captured female pirates rarely received clemency. In the 17th and 18th centuries, during the so-called Golden Age of piracy, British Admiralty courts showed little tolerance for piracy of any kind. But the female defendants were seen as doubly transgressive. They had violated imperial law and gender norms. Trials were held in makeshift naval courts, often in colonies such as Jamaica or New Providence. These courts operated without a jury, and the outcome was often predetermined. The trial was quick, but not without drama. Testimony was taken from ship captains, naval officers, and sometimes frightened sailors. The accused had few legal rights. Anne Bonny and Mary Red, two of the most famous female pirates, were tried in 1720 in Spanish Town, Jamaica. According to the official record, when Bonny was sentenced to death, she bitterly told her lover, Calico Jack, "If you had fought like a man, you would not have been hanged like a dog." Their defense was pregnancy, known as pleading the belly. It was one of the few legal protections afforded to women. In the case of Bonny and Red, it worked temporarily. But most female pirates were not so lucky. Many faced the verdict in silence, knowing that the court had already found them guilty before they could speak. Hanged at Execution Dock for piracy. The river flowed silently, but the shouts of the crowd broke the morning calm. At Execution Dock in London, countless pirates, men and women, met their deaths, dangling above the murky waters of the Thames. Here the British Empire made a bloody example of piracy, and female pirates, though rare, were no exception. Under British maritime law, piracy was a capital crime. The Piracy Act of 1698, passed under William III, clearly stated that any guilty person should suffer the death penalty. Unlike executions on land, these hangings were carried out by the Admiralty. Execution Dock was a symbol. Pirates died with the tide that had once set them free. Women convicted of piracy were sentenced with the same finality as men. Executions followed a cruel ritual. The condemned were taken from Newgate, crossed London in a wagon, escorted and jeered by the crowd. Once at Wapping, they were made to stand under the gallows, sometimes with the noose already around their necks. The fall was not long, thus ensuring a quick death, but brief, causing prolonged strangulation, known as the Marshal's Dance. The body contorted grotesquely before dying. Although female executions were less frequent, they were no less brutal. Mary Critett, an American woman who joined a crew of escaped convicts turned pirates in 1729. She was captured near Virginia and tried in Williamsburg. Found guilty, she was hanged without fanfare or delay. No plea of pregnancy saved her. These public executions served not only to punish, but to terrorize. The bodies of the worst were left hanging until 3 tides had lapped at them, a punishment called gibbeting. More common for men, but the only risk was a clear message: piracy would not be condoned, regardless of gender. In the shadow of the gallows, pirate women went from legends to lessons. Examples sacrificed to maintain order and empire. Whipped in front of the crowd. Before the rope, many female pirates felt the whip. Flogging, an ancient and painful punishment, was often used by naval and colonial authorities. For women, punishment also took on the meaning of spectacle. Their bodies became warning instruments. The audience was meant to learn through their suffering. The whip was the cat-o'-nine-tails, knotted ropes capable of tearing flesh with every blow. Sentences ranged from 12 to over 100 lashes, depending on the severity of the crime and the court's judgment. Punishment took place publicly, often on the docks or outside prisons. Citizens, women, and children attended. In 1720, Anne Bonny and Mary Red, after their capture in Jamaica, were held in terrible conditions. Even before the trial, they were subjected to harsh treatment. There is no direct evidence that they were whipped, but other female pirates in the colonies were often punished thus, either as part of the sentence or to extract confessions. For the authorities, flogging served two purposes: deterrence and degradation. Women who dared to command or fight were publicly humiliated. Blood mingled with the salty air and pebbles. These punishments were not just about justice, but about control. And the spectacle of pain ensured its spread. Forced into concubinage or slavery. Not all captured female pirates were executed. In some cases, especially in colonial ports in the Caribbean, West Africa, and the Americas, women were forced into lives of concubinage, forced labor, or slavery. Direct evidence of this fate, for female pirates in particular, is scarce. Historians recognize that while piracy was a male domain, the women involved could have had different destinies, depending on nationality, race, class, and the discretion of the authorities. In the Spanish and Portuguese colonies, where the boundaries between piracy, privateering, and slavery were blurred, African or indigenous women aboard pirate ships were often sold, regardless of their role. Archives from Portobello and Cartagena in the 17th century tell of women being taken from ships and treated as spoils of war. Black or mixed-race women were often considered slaves. They entered the plantation economy or ended up as servants or concubines. Records rarely distinguished female pirates from others. This makes it difficult to trace its precise fate. But forced servitude was widespread. For many, capture did not mean immediate execution. It meant disappearing into homes, plantations, or holds, stripped of identity, history, and recognition. A silent erosion, recorded not in verdicts, but in silence, left to die on prison ships. For some female pirates, death did not come at the gallows. It arrived slowly and silently aboard decaying prison ships. These floating prisons, anchored near colonial coasts or British ports, they were not designed for long-term confinement. Yet they became places of detention for pirates, rebels, and enemies of the crown, including, at times, women. Direct evidence of the deaths of female pirates on these ships is limited, but the broader context is undeniable. Captured women were often held in the same brutal conditions as men. In the 18th century, with overcrowded prisons, the authorities used decommissioned warships, anchored at Portsmouth, Plymouth, or Kingston. These ships were dark, crowded, and unsanitary. Prisoners were chained below decks. Diseases such as typhus, dysentery, and smallpox spread rapidly. Food was scarce and often spoiled. Women were doubly vulnerable. In addition to hunger and disease, they suffered exploitation and abuse. These incidents were rarely recorded. Without rights or recognition, women were often omitted from the registers. On those silent bridges, history did not record executions. It recorded absences. And in that absence, the fate of many female pirates was sealed, forgotten not by accident, but by design. Their punishments were not just sentences, but instruments of fear, gender power, and imperial control. The fate of female pirates reveals how much the maritime world feared the women who challenged it. These stories still echo in the silence of the prison ships and in the shadows of the gallows. What does their erasure from history tell us about power, justice, and who deserves to be remembered? As the Roman historian Tacitus wrote, "The more corrupt a state, the more numerous its laws." That's all for today. And what do you think about this story about female pirates? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new. See you next time. Bye.